At only $30 more, is a brand new Rustler 4x4 a better value than the new Mini XRT? Let's find out. The VXL Rustler 4x4 has been around for a while, but it was very recently updated, and removing this plastic, we can see it does have a very nice body shell. This body shell does have a full internal cage with skid plate on the top. One downside is it does use Traxxas's older style of clipless body system that uses a little tongue in the front and then a latch in the back. Both the Mini Max and Mini XRT use an updated system where the body uses 2 latches in the front and 2 latches in the rear for retention. Unlike the Mini Max body, the Mini XRT does have a little bit more support for those retention clips. And as you can see here, it does have a skid plate on the roof, but that's not quite as comprehensive as what you see here. And that means this body is probably going to be stronger in the long run. Though again, this retention system does tend to lead to the body coming off in bad crashes. Underneath the body, there are quite a few similarities between the Mini XRT and the Rustler, including a lot of the power system, but there are a ton of differences as well. This Rustler is a fairly small 1/10 scale vehicle, and as you can see, it is quite a bit bigger than the Mini Max and the Mini XRT. The Mini XRT will have a little bit more hanging off the back here because of the wing, but they share the same wheelbase. Overall, though, it isn't that much larger, and I suspect you could bash this Rustler most of the places you could bash the Mini XRT. One place the Rustler is going to have an advantage is where it can bash. These tires are going to be a bit larger than on the Mini XRT. The tires on the Mini XRT are about 94 millimeters in diameter, and as you can see, these are about 110, which means they're about 15 millimeters larger in diameter. Given that they're about 15 millimeters larger in diameter, you're going to get about 7.5 millimeters of additional ground clearance. This is because while it's not an exact science, the ground clearance is largely determined by the diameter of your tires. Tire diameter isn't the only thing that affects ground clearance. The shape of the chassis, suspension components, and anything else that sticks down also play a role. But again, your tire diameter is the primary factor, and additional ground clearance means the car is going to be more versatile over rough terrain. One other thing you're getting on these Rustler 4x4 VXLs are metal hexes. These hexes are 12 millimeter, and whereas they are sintered, I believe they are steel. Yes, these are sintered steel hexes, which means they're going to be pretty strong. I believe the Mini XRT and the Mini Max are going to be living with plastic wheel hexes. Yeah, same 12 millimeter, but just made out of plastic. Whether or not having those steel wheel hexes is a big advantage, I'm not really sure, but metal usually is better in these kinds of areas. As far as the tire material goes, these are really nice. These have been on the Rustler for a while now, and overall they work really, really well. We do have vented wheels and non-vented tires. I would recommend venting your tires on your cars. It's really, really simple to do. All you need is a little piece of copper tubing. This is like 3/16 copper tubing. A drill. Just take that copper tubing, put it in the drill, tighten her down, then take the razor blade at an angle on the inside of the copper tubing and give it a few spins. That'll give you a nice sharp edge on the inside of the tubing. Then just find a spot in the middle of your tire. You don't want to do this with belted tires because you might cut the belts, but any other tire this should work fine on. Put it right in the middle, gently hold it against it, then spin up the drill. And you'll see it will punch a perfect hole in that tire. The reason you want to do it this way and not with a pair of scissors or a knife or anything like that is you don't want to make any ragged edges on that hole, because ragged edges could cause it to split down the road. You could also do this with a soldering iron and melt the holes in, but that's fairly messy, makes a lot of smoke and smell, and this way is just really, really easy. And they end up looking basically like you see from other manufacturers who are already venting the tires. The reason you want to vent the tires and not the wheels is if any debris gets inside the wheel, it's going to get stuck in there. If it gets in the hole in the tire, centrifugal force slings it right back out again. Underneath those tires, this new Rustler 4x4 has a lot of updated components that makes it a lot stronger than it used to be. Starting off, we do have the same Ultra shocks that have been on these 1/10 scale cars for a really long time. And these shocks are okay, but not great. They do tend to blow the shock caps off, and the shock shafts aren't the strongest things in the world. These are actually identical in design to the shocks you get on the Mini XRT and the Mini Max. I will say, given that the Mini XRT and Mini Max are smaller and lighter, they're probably more durable on here. And they're also in double shear up here at the top, which puts less bending stress on the shock caps and probably helps prevent them from coming off. That's a big advantage to the Mini XRT and the Mini Max. More things are in double shear than they are on something like the Rustler. And same as these Ultra shocks have always had, these are standard bladder style shocks, you can see right there. And they're just very general generic shocks. These do work reasonably well though. Fortunately, since these shocks have been around a long time, it is pretty easy to upgrade them. There are a lot of different upgrade options for these shocks or just to replace them with better ones. But this is what comes with the car, and I think even though they're the same shocks on the Mini XRT and the Mini Max, the Mini XRT and the Mini Max have the advantage because it's on a smaller vehicle and the top's in double shear. Behind that, though, we do have the new updated HD hubs and knuckles. And as you can see here, there is a lot more beef than there used to be on these parts. And I don't think these are going to be a weak point anymore. And another place they've really upgraded is these drive shafts. These are basically the same drive shafts as you see on the 4S Max. And as you can see here, everything on the Rustler is a lot more stout than on the Mini XRT and Mini Max, and that is especially true of these axles. The Mini XRT and Mini Max axles are way smaller than what you're going to find on the Rustler, and that's in spite of the fact that the Mini XRT and the Rustler basically have the same power system. Now, the Rustler is more heavy, but only by about 1 pound, so that's not a huge difference. The Rustler weighs 5 pounds, and the Mini XRT weighs about 4 pounds. One big difference you're going to see is you have adjustable links on the top and steering links on the Rustler. The Mini Max has control arms on the top and bottom in the front and rear. I suspect these control arms overall will be more durable, but you get less adjustability if that's important, and you also don't get any adjustability on the steering. For most bashing, I don't think that's a problem, and I think these solid plastic links, if done properly, can actually be stronger. But if adjustability is important to you, you do get it on the only $30 more Rustler VXL. One thing that's not really directly comparable to the Mini XRT is the shock tower. That's because this has a separate removable shock tower, though these shock towers were recently updated and are a lot stronger than they used to be. And I'm curious to see if this updated shock tower makes it less likely for the body to pop off, because I think the main reason it used to pop off was the tower and chassis would flex, allowing that tab to come out. We'll find out in just a few minutes when we bash it. If you appreciate me buying these cars so we can do deep dive comparisons on them, make sure you get subscribed, because we do that stuff here all the time. I would say the bumpers and skid protection on the Rustler and the Mini XRT as well as Mini Max are fairly similar. These are decent, they provide good protection, and overall you're generally not going to have too much trouble with any of them. One place you're going to see a massive difference between the Rustler 4x4 and the Mini XRT are in these front and rear differentials. And this is one of the places I've been the most disappointed with the Mini XRT, because unlike on the Rustler 4x4 and all the 3S Traxxas vehicles, which use a tried and true bevel internal gear system. As you can see here, these are sintered steel, but overall are fairly reliable. The Mini Max and Mini XRT both use... Hang on, we're getting there. We'll talk about that in a minute. The same inferior planetary style differential. And again, you can see just how much smaller the drive shafts are on these mini cars. That's a huge advantage for the Rustler. Inside these gears, instead of having bevel gears, they have a series of spur gears that connect together to create the differential action. And unfortunately, because the teeth on these gears are smaller and the gears themselves are smaller, this planetary style differential is going to be inherently internally weaker than this bevel style differential. Of course, these can be made strong with really high quality gears. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Traxxas has done that, because especially with a 3S system, which the XRT comes with, these differentials tend to blow up. And Traxxas appears to be entirely aware of this weakness because they sell upgraded bevel style differentials for the Mini XRT and the Mini Max. The fact that these bevel differentials aren't in the Mini XRT at its price and power is really baffling to me, though. Of course, the only reason for them to do that is because these planetary style differentials are cheaper. Why are they cheaper? Because it is easier to make these spur style gears, and the tolerances aren't nearly as tight in this type of differential. In a bevel differential, you have to get tolerances in 3 dimensions really, really good. In this, it's really only in 2 dimensions, which means you don't have to have the gears made as precisely, which makes them cheaper. And who knows, maybe the differentials will be just fine in the Mini XRT. We'll just have to wait and see how that works out in the long run. But personally, I think using these differentials in such an expensive mini basher really doesn't cut the mustard. Another place the Rustler has a big advantage is this aluminum center drive shaft. The Mini XRT comes with this plastic drive shaft, though you can get an aluminum drive shaft as an upgrade, though that might be okay, and this is where the differentials might also get saved instead of just having a regular spur gear. As you can see here, the Mini XRT does come with a plastic cased center differential. What a center differential does is allow energy to transfer between the front and rear of the car, as opposed to it all being locked together. Even with the slipper clutch, which I'll show you in just a minute, without a center differential, the entire drivetrain of the car is locked together. So let's say you're landing a jump and these wheels are spinning and the back wheel hits the ground and stops. Without a center differential, the front wheel also has to stop, and the entire force of the inertia of the drivetrain has to travel through the entire drivetrain. That can be really, really hard on stuff, which is why they've added a center differential to the Mini XRT. One other weakness is that it seems like these inputs tend to shear off on the Mini Max, and I'm assuming also on the Mini XRT, though maybe less with that center differential. That's not something I've ever experienced on a Rustler 4x4. Another thing I'm reminded of as I'm working on this is that in most, if not all respects, the Rustler 4x4 is actually easier to work on than the Mini XRT and the Mini Max. But now let's talk about some places that the Mini XRT definitely has some advantages and some places you might be surprised to find that it might not. First of all, unlike the Mini Max, the Mini XRT is coming with the metal geared 2075X Traxxas servo. That's a massive upgrade, and is also an upgrade to the 2075 servo that's controlling the steering on this Rustler, which is also plastic geared. Now, speaking of control, both the Mini XRT and the Rustler come with the venerable Traxxas TQI transmitter. This does have the ability to install a Bluetooth module and is overall a decent transmitter, though getting a little long in the tooth at this point. But on the receiver side, the Rustler has a huge advantage. And that is this actually waterproof receiver box. As you can see, there's a real gasket here, and the wires go through a real gasket here. I'm going to do some actual waterproof testing on the Mini XRT in the next video, but if it's anything like the Mini Max, which it looks like it is, the receiver actually makes up the bottom of the receiver box, and I don't think it's going to be waterproof at all. That receiver is going to be controlling basically the same VXL 3S ESC and motor in the Rustler and the Mini XRT, though unlike on the Mini XRT, which has a center differential, as you can see, the Rustler just has a slipper clutch in here. Of course, since the Rustler's been around a long time, upgrades are cheap and plentiful. This all steel and aluminum center differential is about 30 bucks, but that's not how it comes out of the box, so that's not how we're gonna test it. Now, to say that the Rustler's only $30 more than the Mini XRT is a little bit misleading, as the Mini XRT does come with a battery, but there's a catch. It's only a 2S battery, and the charger that it comes with, while functional, isn't great. So if you're going to want 3S on your Mini XRT, which most people are probably going to, this battery isn't adding any value, and honestly, I think you should buy a better charger than what comes along with these things. Not being able to see anything about what's going on with your battery really isn't great for keeping yourself safe with these LiPos, and whereas there are some basic protections built into these chargers, the best protection you can have is being able to monitor the health of your battery yourself. So again, whereas this is an added value, and it does put a caveat on that $30 price difference, I think for a lot of people, it's not going to make much difference. And one place that the Rustler does have a huge advantage is its standard size battery tray. This will take standard 2S and 3S LiPos. There are a bunch of different clamps you can use, and then of course there are strap style upgrades. And whereas this size battery isn't hard to come by, a standard size battery is going to be easier to come by, and you probably already have one if this isn't your first RC car. Of course, what you get is important, but performance and durability are even more important, so let's get this thing together and see how it bashes. All right, guys, stock out of the box with a 3S battery. Let's see what this thing can do. A lot of people ask me why I run off-road for my speed tests, and that's because I think it's how most of you are going to be running these cars. So it's probably what you're interested in top speed on. Running it on road, yeah, you can definitely get a faster top speed, but how many of you guys are going to be speed running these things on road versus how many of you guys are going to be bashing them off road? I think most of us are going to bash a basher off road, and that's where the top speed matters. Let's see what we got here. Now, of course, this is with the stock gearing, and Traxxas is famous for needing higher speed pinions to get top speed. And as you can see here, we got 43 miles an hour out of the box. That's not terrible, but it could certainly do more. But how does it handle with bashing? That's the real question. The Mini Max really did not bash very well, and I suspect the Mini XRT will bash better. Of course, I'm gonna have my hands on one of those in a couple of days, and we're gonna be doing a full review on it, but how the Rustler handles is kind of a known quantity, and overall, it's pretty good. It's got plenty of power out of the box. It actually has really nice tires. These Talon tires have been around for a while, and they get good grip on a variety of different surfaces, which is why Traxxas has stuck with them for a while. The suspension is tuned reasonably well out of the box, even though these Ultra shocks aren't the strongest in the world, and they're certainly not the most advanced in the world. They do get the job done, and as you can see, this thing isn't trying to traction roll too often, and is overall relatively easy to handle, and it also likes to land on its wheels. Now, this does have self-righting. We're not going to try it here because I think a truggy with self-righting probably isn't the best idea in the world, though at least in my experience, self-righting doesn't really hurt anything. But of course, that's a topic for another video. Make sure you get subscribed if you want to see a full self-righting evaluation and test video. That's definitely something we're going to have coming in the future, but how this thing handles out of the box, it's a lot of fun, it's reasonably easy to control, and overall it feels really, really nice. I think it's on par with the latest offerings from Arrma. The 223S truggy that they offer is actually a little bit cheaper and comes with a center differential, but I think they both handle about the same, and this one might be a little bit more precise in its handling. Of course, again, it is quite a bit more expensive. The real question is, how does it jump out of the box? This is a basher truggy, so jumping should definitely be on its bingo card. Let's see what we get with the ramp. Get some speed up. We'll take a nice slow jump at first. Straight to a backflip, and not too bad. It doesn't have a ton of air control. Again, I think a bigger pinion would fix that. Traxxas is usually pretty conservative out of the box with their gearing, but it does jump well and it lands pretty well. Overall feels good, though I would say not the most exciting thing in the world to jump, at least not straight out of the box. It's competent, but it's not setting the world on fire, and it does land fairly hard, though just like with the 4S Max, that really bad slamming sound you hear when it lands has more to do with how the body's attached than the truck itself. You ever get the feeling you forgot to screw a part on? Oh well, we don't need that. Like I was saying, all these cars are gonna chassis slap when they land. That's just how they're designed, and it's designed to protect the shocks and the suspension. What that slap sounds like largely depends on how the body is designed, and especially with the way these are mounted, the body tends to slam into the Nerf bars when it hits, and the body's basically a speaker, so you're gonna hear it. And that's where a lot of that sound comes from. It's not really a problem per se, and not really an indicator of a design issue. Let's get more big backflip. Oh, okay, let's save that for the durability test. Before we do that durability test, we should probably have the car completely together. I definitely have some thoughts on this latest version of the Rustler 4x4 VXL. But before I tell you about those, durability is obviously going to be very important to someone buying a basher, and this 3S platform overall has been pretty durable. I think the HD parts that they recently added make a big difference. Although, it definitely still has some weak points. By the way, I've had a few people mention that my ramp is not ideal, and you're right, it really isn't. I built this new ramp because my old one fell apart, and the design of it isn't quite right. I'm going to be redoing that, or possibly replacing it soon. So, we're not going to be able to get the most air in the world out of this thing, but we should be able to do a few good crashes. Especially on power like that. That's pretty hard on everything, and that's especially true given that we don't have a center differential in this thing. And I honestly think, especially with these fairly small crashes, it's probably going to hold up just fine. Overall, the Mini Max and Mini XRT platform are also pretty durable. Which one is more durable? Probably just depends on what you're doing with it. But yeah, we're definitely going to have to do something about this ramp. It's just way too sharp of an angle at the top. I was trying to get this thing to where the cars would go nearly vertical, and they do, but they do it at like 2 miles an hour. I'd expect the servo on this thing to be one of the first things to die. Arms can also be a weak point, but overall, in general, especially again with those HD components, it's a reasonably tough truck for just general bombing around, and it's also going to be more versatile on things like this taller grass because it has bigger tires and better ground clearance. Overall, this thing's pretty fun, but now let's take it inside and talk about its value after maybe one more crash.
Let's see if we can get a good on power crash landing. Oh, man, that's hard on everything. Let's do one more. All right, here we go. Line it up. Nope. It's kind of hard to line these up from the side sometimes. All right, one more. Here we go. Line it up. A little bit rough out here too, but it does seem to handle the rough stuff pretty well. One more try. There we go. Oh.
Now, whereas obviously we're going to have to wait till we do a full review of the Mini XRT, I can tell you that for $30 extra, you're going to get a car that's a little bit longer, a little bit wider, and has a little bit better ground clearance. Whether or not you think that's an advantage or a disadvantage just depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a small car, obviously a Mini is going to be a better choice, though these are starting to push the limits of Mini size as well. But what you also get is the exact same power system, a better waterproofing system for the receiver, basically the same shocks, differentials that are easier to get to and that are higher quality, bigger, stronger axle shafts, larger tires and wheels, an aluminum center drive shaft, and the ability to run standard size 3S batteries without any trouble whatsoever. But you are going to give up some things, and one of those out of the box is the center differential. You also get what I would say is an inferior clip style system. This one didn't fall off, but they can. Though unlike the Mini XRT, this body does have a full cage underneath, which should make it even stronger. Now again, we're going to have to wait for my full review of the Mini XRT to really judge which one I think you should spend your money on, but I think at least we can see they both have their advantages and their disadvantages. And at least compared to the price of the Mini XRT, the slightly larger Rustler seems to be a pretty good deal. Now, if you're excited to see my full teardown and review of the Mini XRT, where we will do a more serious durability test of this as well, and compare it to a bunch of other options in the same size range, make sure you get subscribed. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this latest version of the Rustler VXL for 400 bucks. Are you going to buy one of these, or are you going to go ahead and pick up one of those Mini XRTs? Let me know down in the comments. Make sure you hit that bell for all notifications, because that's how I announce winners of giveaways, and check out one of these guys.